welcome to this episode of the Gig Harbor Flycast. And I'm super stoked because today I have my friend Brian Bennett, and we've been chatting here for a while, and I finally just said I should just hit record because we're never going to get this thing done. And it's 11:30 right now, and we've
been here about 2.5 hours.
So
here we go.
Yeah, so hope all of you are staying safe and sane. And
yes.
That's the second part is the one I keep thinking about. Just so I had a client last week, and great guy. He's just a really fun guy to be with. His name's Mark, and we were out fishing, and he's got a daughter, and I hadn't really thought about this. We were talking about just the stay-at-home thing and just what life is like because of all that. And he's working from home, and I've been working from home, and you know, I have two kids, and they like play together. I mean, they're buddies, and like, you know, they get in fights and stuff like that once in a while too. But like, you know, they entertain each other, and I'm like, man, I had not thought about how hard this whole thing is for families that just have one kid.
Yeah, I'm in that camp.
You have to try to like entertain your kid all day.
Oh yeah. I had to peel the bumper sticker on my car that said my kid is an honor student at Adelaide Elementary School because she's in 5th grade with me. I got a C- in 5th grade math.
Dude, 5th grade math is not easy.
It's just like shocking. Like I'm the gym teacher, the piano teacher, and the language arts teacher. That's my role. So the gym teacher, it's bowling on the Nintendo Wii. And she kicks my.
You're being serious.
I'm not kidding you. She kicks my butt. Like she's so like I had her for a day or two, and now it's like, can we try tennis?
Well, I won't play games with my kids where there is a chance of them winning.
Yeah, we moved on to Clue. Like she's into Clue right now. Big time.
My kids, I just don't like that game.
Yeah, it's like murder. I guess it's a weird game, right?
Yeah,
Parcheesi's been really big.
Oh, we haven't done that one.
Yeah, Parcheesi's good. Uno, of course. Like that's just.
I was trying to teach my kids cribbage, but I forgot the rules. We got to one point where I'm like, oh yeah, I can't remember if it's this or that, or So a couple of the guys that I do trips with, Doug and Whitney, and some of these guys, they're huge cribbage guys, and so I got to get into it. I enjoy it, but I never remember how to play it.
When we get done, maybe later we'll play Hand of True Cribbage.
I don't know. I kind of have a lot of work to do today, Brian.
So here's the funny thing on cribbage. There's a way to play cribbage where you don't play to, like it's like playing with your kids. You don't play to win. You try to play to lose. The loser is the one that gets to the end first. And so you're trying to throw away all your fives and all your face cards and all you're trying to get rid of all that stuff.
Well, if we play and if you win, I'll celebrate and I'll fess up.
We were lose, weren't we? No doubt.
I'm glad you gave me.
But cribbage is one of those games, like especially in the fly fishing space. I mean, I think I have it. Cliff guys, make the fly boxes,
sure,
amongst other things, sent me one of their cribbage boards that comes in the fly box. So it folds
up. Oh, really?
Yeah, it's super cool.
Sounds cool.
So it's cribbage and dice. So it's both. So you can play the dice game too.
Okay, so here's something that everyone needs to know about Brian, and then we'll get into some more serious stuff about Brian. But if there's something that's cool, Brian knows it or has it. Like, for example, Brian was just saying, it's like, yeah, I have this Patagonia Stormfront cooler bag. I'm like, I've never even heard of a Stormfront cooler bag. He's like, well, it's because there's only one in the world and I have it. We should do a giveaway. I'm like, you can't give that away.
Yeah.
And the only reason why he says we should do a giveaway is because he knows that he has 1,000 other one-of-a-kind cool items in his garage that he doesn't know what to do with because he has so much cool stuff.
I got a few things. It just comes from longevity and the outdoor.
Being in the industry. Okay, so to get into that, Brian and I, we met because Brian was working for Patagonia and was in charge of the fish program, and I have this right.
Yeah, right. So I was the REI account manager for Patagonia,
right,
and then I was the part-time fly fishing sales manager for a couple of years.
Yes, and so that's how we met, because even though you were in charge of kind of the whole fish program over the country, you live here. You live like not too far away, half hour away. And so, man, it's been 10 years that
I can't believe it.
that we've been hanging out and fishing and all sorts of stuff. And
look at us now.
I know.
Doing a podcast.
We're finally.
Yeah. We've been talking about this for whatever, but it's been really fun.
But a lot of people know you because of Patagonia. You've been in outdoor retail forever.
They would call me a woodchuck, I think is the... So literally, if you've been in the outdoor industry like more than 20 years or 25 years, you get literally an enamel pin that's a woodchuck.
Really?
Yeah, there was a guy named Larry Harrison did it, so I'm a woodchuck. I got into the outdoor industry in 1987.
Yeah.
And I actually started in the bike world, so I was a huge bike geek. I raced bikes. And so I was in the bike industry, and that evolved into outdoor, and then ultimately Patagonia and fishing and all that stuff. I'm late to the fishing game, actually. I didn't start fly fishing until 2000. So.
Which was 20 years ago.
I know, 10 years ago it seemed like it was like yesterday, but yeah. But in the scheme of things, like I didn't fish as a kid.
Yeah.
Like I never had that exposure. Like fishing for me is.
You didn't fish as a kid, really?
No, fishing as a kid for me was sitting on the dock with my grandfather in Maine,
right,
dunking worms and watching them.
Which I feel bad for any kid that doesn't have that experience.
Yeah,
every kid should dunk worms. That should just be, part of growing up.
Yeah, and it was the proverbial then they went to the supermarket and bought the fish and brought it home kind of thing, right?
Clearly.
It was one of those things. But my parents never really, regular, mainstream sports like baseball and soccer and all that stuff. I was involved in all of that, but fishing, skiing, all that stuff came later in life for me. And
so your first fly fishing experience, where was that at? What'd you do?
So I worked for a company called Kelty, which makes backpacks, one of the oldest backpack companies around, and the president of that company is a guy named Casey Sheehan, who's now actually the president at Sims Fishing.
And he was at Patagonia.
He was at Patagonia and at Kelty at the time. And he's a big fly angler, just hardcore. And I had another friend that was kind of an acquaintance, and I had told him, hey, our new president is into fishing, and he's like, oh, you should take it up. And I'm like, fishing's stupid. I didn't get it.
Sure.
I never had that exposure. And so he sent me a kit. It was an Orvis Bat and Kill 4-weight and matching reel.
Where were you live? Is this in Colorado?
I was living in Colorado in Boulder, and
There's no fly fishing there.
None. Well, I can even get into more of that later. But when we talk East Coast and striped bass, I went to school in a place. I lived in a place in Salem, Massachusetts, where I could have walked down the street and caught striped bass.
Yeah.
It just pains me right now. I realize all the years I missed.
If you had known then.
Exactly.
Right.
So we did a trip. We used to take retailers on trips. So we were up in Jackson, and we were on, I can't remember the lake, base of Mount Moran, and we paddled across in a canoe, and I had that little setup, and I had a little, I think it was actually one of those little lambskin pouch fly things that I got from Orvis.
I still have one of those.
Yeah, it was it came with 5 flies.
It's it's a zippered wallet with.
And it had a couple flies. It had a few flies in it, and so I remember it had a Royal Coachman in it.
Ooh.
Of course, right? Gandhi would have used the Royal Coachman. So that was a comment on Moldy Chum. Anyway, so we paddle across, and there's the inlet creek that came in to this lake. It was beautiful, flat. And I had a rep there who worked for me. I was a sales manager at the time, and Roger, and he was a big fly angler. And I remember watching him and casting, and it was beautiful, the light. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And so I just kind of hiked up.
I can do that.
Yeah, not really. But I walked up this little creek, and there were all these little plunge pools, and I took my little Royal Coachman, and I just kind of went, whoop, and literally first cast, fish, little cutthroat, came up and ate it, and I have the picture.
And it's all been downhill since then.
So I went all in.
Yeah.
So that next year, I probably had 200 days on the water.
Wow.
And so funny story is, my wife, when I met the woman who became my future wife, she owned a tracker bass boat with literally 2 trolling motors, 2 fish finders. Serious.
Yeah.
And she kind of worked for me in the warehouse at Kelty, and I needed stuff. I'd call, hey, what are you doing this weekend? I'm going fishing. I'm like, it's stupid. So I went all in
Yeah.
at that point. And so I had really great mentors. And, it's interesting about the relationships that you make. And so the guy that gave me that fly rod and reel has passed away since then. And so the meaning of all of that, like what he did defined me as a person now.
Sure.
Because fly fishing really defines me as a person. And I wish I had been able to do it earlier. But,
You're making the most of it now.
Trying. And there's always been these steps along the way. Like my mentors, like Casey, the president of Kelty at the time. I remember going on my first steelhead, like serious swinging steelhead trip on the Bulkley. It was a perk. That was one of the reasons you get in the business, is the perks are pretty good.
Yeah.
And so we went to the Bulkley River Lodge.
I thought it was because we all make tons of money.
Yeah, no. How do you make a small fortune in the fly fishing industry?
Start with the big one.
Start with the big one. Exactly right. And so the last day I swung up a 40-inch steelhead, And I remember going, and basically Casey was like, the boy has become a man. So there's all those.
Never caught a 40-inch steelhead.
Yeah, this was legit. 21 inches around. It was a beast.
That's awesome.
So that was, yeah, I can define my life from 2000 in fishing terms. You can find all those, like that first little cutthroat, that first swung up steelhead, the first giant trevally, first permit.
Yeah.
All of that. So,
Yeah. I mean, you and I both love to explore new fisheries and travel and stuff like that. And some anglers are very content to just stick with what they've always fished for.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I think I've been fortunate to have the opportunity. If I hadn't been in the industry, I probably would not have been able to do some of these things. So I'm very fortunate in that respect. But, I'll tell you, some of my favorite fisheries, I could fish for sea run cutthroat every day on the Sound and be really, really happy.
Yeah.
For sure, because there's threads that run through angling regardless, and so you adjust your tactics and your gear and all of that, and the dynamics are all the same.
Sure.
So, but yeah, and I think that, this whole COVID thing and how this all plays out long term, and that whole kind of destination-driven exotic travel thing. I mean, yeah, it's really, really important, but I think people are changing that viewpoint a little bit, because we've been kind of forced to do that. Yeah. And I think that's good it's good for the sport. I think it's ultimately going to be good for the fish, because I think people are going to care more about their home waters and things. So yeah, but we've been lucky, and you've done a good job. I mean, you've had some great opportunities through your business to be able to experience some things that are, pretty special. So
yeah, I got a couple trips on the books coming up that
you hope happen.
I hope happen. So
yeah, I've canceled. So I had an opportunity to go to the Dean the first week in June.
Yeah.
Rebooked again for next year.
Yeah.
I do an annual striper camp. My parents, I grew up on the East Coast.
Yeah. Yeah, you're usually there for 2 or 3 weeks every year.
2 weeks, yeah. Last week in June, first week in July, just pulled the plug on that. My mom cried. And then I have another trip back to ESB Lodge in the first week in November, actually during the election, which would be a great place to be.
You're telling me about that.
Make them unplug the wireless and not know until you get back to Cancun.
Right.
But that is still on the book, but is probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because of COVID.
Yeah, we canceled our Tofino trip for August, and we were supposed to do a trip that was on the. We're going to do the traditional fishing from the skiffs in the salt water for coho, all that stuff that we've done 7 or 8 times. But then the second trip that we were going to host back to back up there was going to be a wilderness camping kayak trip. Yep. And so that was really, so I pulled the plug on it. I mean, one, because I'm like, I don't think these trips are going to happen, and so it's not fair to all the people that I'm holding their deposits. It's like, if I don't think the trips are going to happen, I need to refund their deposits and just cancel this thing, right? Yeah. And there's no way I can pull together that kayak camping, trip last minute. So we can pull together the boat trip last minute if things open up and all that kind of stuff, and we feel like it's safe to do and all that kind of stuff, because it's actually a trip that is really easy to social distance on and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's the beauty of that. I mean, as we know, that's the thing about fishing. It's everywhere, and you can social distance, and kayaks and boats and camping and all that. Unfortunately, the border's not even open yet.
Right. Not for another month.
Exactly.
So
who knows what will happen after that?
Yeah. So we're still doing our Montana trip at the end of September, early October. And
With that Reisler trip?
yeah. So we partnered with Headhunters, and so that'll be a great trip. And then we moved our Cuba trip from October to end of February. And so I think hopefully things are in a place where we can do that. That'll be great.
I had some friends that had, actually Jim, who was just in the shop here a minute ago, they had to cancel their Cuba trip.
Yeah.
Which
it
was May, actually.
Was supposed to be on Christmas Island a month ago today, and we had to cancel that trip and move it to next April. And so
it'd be really interesting. I mean, they shut down pretty aggressively. So
they did.
I'd be really curious. I mean, I think theoretically, getting back into Christmas right after it opens up, could be really, really good. I'm curious as to how they're managing, potential netting and all those kind of things right now. I mean, I would hope that they're being, that they haven't kind of fallen back into some of those old practices that they do there. I don't know where that news is, but, we did I do this conservation from the couch thing, the Chum. Some people may have seen it. It's been really good. But we had the guys from Bonefish Tarpon Trust on. And the tarpon fishing in the Keys, everything's lined up. It's been incredible. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the fish haven't been harassed. There haven't been many boats. There's been nobody from the outside coming in. And Aaron said that even, in the Bahamas, like normally, those fish get wise after those bonefish get wise after they've been targeted for a while. And you go back in October when things open up, the fishing's usually pretty good. And he said right now it's like being there. The fishing's incredible.
Yeah.
So there's some real benefits. I think CX Christmas is one of those places that could be really interesting.
It'd be pretty sweet to be the first group to
be in there,
to be there and fish it.
Yeah.
Those GTs and stuff.
Yeah.
So
like I think the lagoon fishing could be better than it's probably been in a long time. For sure.
Yeah. Christmas Island got satellite Wi-Fi just a handful of years ago, and so now all those guides are, they have phones and they're on Facebook, and so I stay in contact with a handful of them.
Yep.
And so it sounds like with the once a week Fiji air flight, hasn't happened now for a couple months, and so there's no supplies coming in from that. And then they were having a barge from Fiji coming in, bringing in supplies, and that comes in I think every 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. Mm-hmm. But they stopped the barge because of COVID cases in Fiji, and Kiribati was trying to they're really trying to keep themselves safe, and so I'm kind of texting some of these guys. I'm like, hey, how you guys hanging in there?
Eating bonefish?
Like we're not doing anything. We're eating fish and rice and coconuts.
Yeah.
But like the rice they bring in. So sooner or later they're going to run out of rice and they're going to run out of supplies. And
well, there was that supply ship that used to come in too from Hawaii every month, I think, that used to park there. But I'm not sure what's going on there.
I don't know if they are with. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, interesting times.
You could say that again.
Yeah, it's
right?
been a little bit.
We talk about the Canadian border being closed and when it might open up. Shoot, in 60 days we might be at war with Canada.
You never know.
The way this thing's going, you never know what might happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if there's a shortage of toilet paper and maple syrup,
we're invading.
We're gonna want some resources.
My kids got to have. I got to make French toast. No maple syrup, man. I'm dead.
Yeah. No corn syrup.
Exactly.
Syrup. Yeah. We want the real maple.
Yeah. What's Mrs. Butterworth? Yeah. No.
This is horrible, by the way. It's terrible.
No doubt.
It's terrible.
Classic.
Okay, so we've been just rambling on.
This is what we could do. We could do 6 episodes of this.
We might, but
we should do it. We should just do a podcast that's like Hacks on Tap, like it's a political one, and it's like Mike Murphy and the other guy is I can't remember his name, but he was like it's a Republican and a Democrat.
Yeah.
And they're in a pub. It's called Hacks on Tap.
Sure.
And they just talk about stuff like politics and what's going on. Like we could do that. We could do one like not every week, but we should just do one. Yeah.
But then we'd have to. I really don't want to talk politics.
No, we don't have to do that.
We can talk other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so Moldy Chum is where you spend a bit of your time, and why people, you're known as like Moldy Chum.
For sure.
Like you were in one of our YouTube videos recently, and someone's like, "Was that Moldy Chum?"
Right.
Like,
yeah, my left arm is Moldy, my right arm is Chum. I am Moldy Chum.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah. So okay. So what? I mean, for those that don't know, what is Moldy Chum, and how did you guys get started?
So we started in 2005 was when Moldy Chum launched. But prior to that, as I mentioned earlier, I was in the outdoor industry and I wasn't really much of a fishing guy. I was fishing at the time, and that was when blogging was kind of just beginning.
Sure.
And so I was a partner on an outdoor industry style blog. So, like if you think about the early Chum, those of you that knew it, this was the same idea but outdoor industry stuff. Very edgy, kind of like the Onion, meets the outdoors. And early on, Moldy Chum was like the Onion meets fly fishing. And so we were always posting serious stuff, but 80% of the time we were just being goofy. And this was pre-Facebook and pre-Instagram and pre all the other social media. So at some point I was doing this piton thing and spending a lot of time on the piton. And I was really getting into fly fishing.
Right.
And so I was like, why am I not doing this with fly fishing?
Yeah.
And so I basically did both for a while, but that's how the Chum launched. And it's been an interesting ride since. I mean, early on, it was a strictly labor of love. Like if you looked at the amount of hours and time that I've put into that over the years, it's shocking, really. And
it's your other child.
Yeah, and it is like those of you that have been with me all that time, we call it the Chum Nation. It's global. There's been literally maybe 1 day or 2 days in its entire history when we haven't posted something. And that's because we had a technical difficulty.
Yeah.
Or we were flipping the platform over. So, and in the heyday, we were 4 or 5 posts a day, and we're a content aggregator. We shine a light on other things. It's not like we had day jobs and spouses and ultimately kids, and so we didn't spend a ton of time writing 300-word blog posts. Our thing was like we would put a picture up and make a pithy headline and share it, and that which is kind of a lot of social media now. So, but we've evolved over that time, and over that time, as the other social media channels have come to life, we've changed. And so, honestly, our viewership, compared to what it was in the early days, is much lower than it used to be, because back in the day, the only place you could see big people holding big fish, Slab of the Month contest, and honestly, women in bikinis holding fish was on Moldy Chum. And you go to Instagram and all those other places right now, and there's just a plethora of that kind of content.
Sure.
So even though our numbers are kind of down, our engagement has gone up dramatically. The amount of time people spend, kind of our influence within the industry, conservation is a pillar of what we do. And that's also something that I do personally, and those things kind of develop together. But that's how we got to where we are today. And so super proud of it, super proud to have inspired some other people. You look at, I'm not saying that, a lot of these other sites that are out there and kind of what they've embraced is, directly a result of of Moldy Chum. Mm-hmm. But in some respects, there is a little bit of that. Yeah. So that's something that to me is, where you can have some kind of influence and, for people and do some good work. Yeah. We've done a couple things. I could list them, over the years where, we've shined a light on something and we've made a difference. And those are the things that have been the most important. So.
Yeah. So like one of the things that you've been doing recently, conservation from the couch.
Yeah.
So this has been a partnership with AFTA.
That's correct.
Right? And there's been a bunch of different sponsors involved in that.
We call it supporters. Like we're not making people pay.
Sure.
But if you look at it, we've touched every.
How did this idea come up? And then what is it? And then kind of talk about like where it came from, because I'm like, I bet Brian thought this one up. But
no, so it's not. So honestly, it's not. It wasn't my idea.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. So, but the idea came from my partner in crime, Paul Moynister.
Okay.
Who was a real formal partner in Moldy Chum for a couple of years, and is a brilliant guy. Used to work on Capitol Hill, incredible writer. He's written for Fly Fish Journal, Patagonia, everybody. And through the Chum has become one of my dearest friends. Well, he and another guy named Lucas Bassett, who's a guide out of New Orleans, They do some work for Ocean Conservancy, along a lot of saltwater stuff, and so they kind of came up with the idea initially, and then they reached out to me. Well, what do you think? Could you help support it and push it out? So I've had some creative influence on it on the back end, but it was really their idea.
Yeah.
And the idea essentially is that while we're all stuck on the couch during the pandemic, you can learn something about a particular species of fish and particular groups that are working to protect them. And what we've learned, and it's been really, really good. We did a striper, one about stripers and featured American Saltwater Guides Association. We did Louisiana redfish. We did tarpon and permit, which is Bonefish Tarpon Trust, and we did a steelhead episode, which was here in Wild Steelhead Coalition. And actually last night we just wrapped up. So it was only supposed to be 4 episodes.
Sure.
And there was such people loved it so much that we're doing additional ones. And last night we did one with the team from TU, which was really, really good. And they could provide links in the description on this.
Is there a fishery? So just as you're sharing about this, I'm just thinking. Is there a fishery that you know of in the country that's a popular fishery that doesn't have that doesn't need and have a group to advocate for it and to address issues with the fishery?
No, I don't think so. And what was really funny about this, well, not funny, but I think what was really meaningful about this and the biggest lesson learned from it, yeah, sure, we were talking about striped bass and we were talking about redfish and both, but there was a consistent thread.
Through all of them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Regardless of the species, regardless of where you were, you heard the same themes through every single episode. Now 5 episodes. And so to me, that is the real value of what this is kind of.
What were some of those themes that you discovered?
Well, that we all have the same vested interest, whether we're protecting redfish or we're protecting steelhead. And that's always been one of the challenges, like, as somebody that's been fighting on behalf of wild steelhead, how do you get somebody that's never fished for a steelhead, who's a East Coast guy, to care about steelhead? And
it's so hard.
It is, but when you watch a webinar where you've got people on and they're talking about the challenges that they face, and all, you can relate to it.
Yeah.
And so I think building those threads across species and anglers and all that stuff, you kind of build a bigger collective voice potentially to be able to do some work beyond just kind of preaching to your usual choir.
Okay, I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
So if pretty much every popular fishery across the country is in need of advocates and conservation work,
mm-hmm.
What do you think is the responsibility for the average fly angler, or at least the bare minimum? Because I know some anglers. We know a lot of anglers because of our customer base. Some of them are very involved in conservation work. They either donate money, they go out and get their hands dirty with cleanups, and some of them are involved on the science side of it. But then there's other anglers that their conservation work is releasing the fish with proper techniques of catch and release. Other than that, that's it.
Right.
So for people listening in, and maybe I'm assuming we have some. We have some people listening in that maybe they've only been fly fishing a year or maybe 6 months, and they're just starting to learn about these fish that they're exploring and catching and stuff like that. They're like, oh, there's issues with these, or there's people that are doing things to help the fish,
mm-hmm.
and do they need help and all that kind of stuff. So what are just like some basic, maybe what's the threshold of like, hey, this is really what people should be thinking about.
So it's really, for me, it's kind of one of the most important things, right? Like, how do you activate? And you mentioned there's people that their level of activation can be just from releasing fish to doing a cleanup. And I think I'll frame it with this. It's like when you get into fly fishing, and we talked about this on the TU couch session last night. When I first started fly fishing, I all of a sudden cared about the water, and I cared about the fish, and I learned about bugs, and so I had this desire to get more knowledge, and I became a TU member because that's what I did, and that was that's how the fly fishing is a gateway to all of this. So That's super important. I think that there is and I will say this, it's like oftentimes we look at the doom and gloom of all of this. And if you look at, this is kind of the importance of these conversations, is we heard about how the driftless area, like 50 years ago, that it was devastated. It was ruined from poor practices and stream management and erosion. And now there's, tens of miles, hundreds, of miles of restored fishable water. So there are really some good success stories. I guess you would call it, this is a term, conservation hobbyism to some extent. Like, where do you draw the line between, you got to click off the box, right? You join TU, you send some money to the Wild Steelhead Coalition, you show up and drink some beers and do a raffle ticket and you raise some money. That's all. That's great.
Yeah.
But how do you kind of go to that kind of next level? And for that, it's, the stream cleanup, building community, all that stuff is really important, getting your fingernails dirty. But when it comes to kind of political activism, you can go online and, fill in your email address and you're on a change.org petition. That's kind of clicking the box.
Yeah.
While you're on the couch and doing stuff, picking up the phone, first of all, learning and educating yourself about the issue, and then picking up the phone or writing a personal email about an issue to somebody that has the power, whether it's in Olympia or Washington, D.C., or whatever city hall or state house in the state that you live in, that's where you can really begin to move the meter on some of these really important issues. And I think, Sam Snyder, he's somebody that I've met through all of the work that I've done. He's been very active on the Pebble Mine campaign. He's a scholar. He's written, about conservation and fly fishing historically, Haig Roderick Brown and those kind of things. And he wrote a piece, and it was in the Chum, and it was like, if you're not going to get involved in some of these things as a fly angler, you should get off the water. That's kind of the price. I mean, it was definitely pointed and it was really harsh. But if you're going to take advantage of that resources for all the reasons that we all love so much, you do really have to take some time to get involved to help protect that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's not easy. It's not easy to get started, and opportunities to volunteer are not. They're not just apparent, and a lot of times, like a lot of conservation groups, they want your involvement in the form of a check or an email, but other than that, a lot of them haven't done a really great job at soliciting people's help for just like boots on the ground stuff. So so maybe so I'm assuming a lot of our listeners are here in Washington, and so the two things that come up with our customer base a lot is wild steelhead probably comes up the number one, but the other one is with coastal cutthroat. And there's the Coastal Cutthroat Coalition that's doing research and a lot of projects to learn about the fish because we know nothing about them. But wild steelhead that's been a long fight because the numbers just keep dwindling. Whether people fish for steelhead or not, steelhead are just they're an important fish to our state and our heritage.
State fish.
And so
it's an indicator species too, like salmon and all that stuff. Fish are kind of, you look at.
What are three ways that people could, give three options to newer anglers that they're like, I want to do something that's more than just, joining to be a member of the Wild Steelhead Coalition, which they should do.
So there's a number of groups out there. That's one of the things that to backtrack just for 1 second, is I think there's one of the, not conundrums, but one of the things is there's multiple groups all trying to do the same thing.
Sure.
And everybody has their own tactics. And then there's also groups that are trying to do the same thing that you might not even agree with, and the policy positions that they have around whether it's hatcheries or dams and all those kind of things. So, and for me, a lot of it stems from abundance. So if you look at it, if you look at the striped bass fishery right now on the East Coast, striped bass are in trouble, but you can still go out and catch them. They're there. It's not, and so the fights aren't as kind of contentious because there's still kind of enough to go around. Pebble Mine's another example. Largest, like, I can't remember, Chris Wood said this on the show, like the percentage of the entire salmon population of the world that comes out of there is crazy.
Yeah.
So no one's fighting over the resources. Like, yeah, we don't want that mine in there. We all agree on that.
Sure.
But then you get to steelhead, we're fighting over crumbs at this point.
Yeah.
3%, 2% of historical abundance, like crazy. So I think the first thing is to find that group that you're most aligned with. You know, if you're a pitchfork and torches guy, like I tend to be, you know, maybe you're going to gravitate to a particular group because you want to stir it up.
Right.
I think the first thing, though, is you've got to really educate yourself on what the issues are and find out within those issues what are the ones that are important to you. And it's a personal thing because if you're a steelhead angler, you've got a personal connection to it, and to bring other people into it. Like,
sure.
That's the other piece. That's the second piece. It's like,
so to educate people,
yourself, and then bring your friends in with you.
Yeah. So we have a couple things that are happening now that are steelhead related that people could learn about. So let's point people to a couple of those resources.
You bet.
So, I mean, Shane Anderson, some of his stuff is...
I heard he was on the podcast.
Oh, shut up. Shut up, you jerk. You did that. Oh.
I had to throw it out there.
Oh,
hey, Shane, I hope you're watching.
Yeah, I hope you are, Shane. I am so sorry. I'm an idiot. We recorded a podcast with Shane, and you know it's during this whole COVID thing, and we tried to do it over Zoom, and I screwed it up. And
I got to tell you, having worked with Zoom on Conversation with the Couch, Zoom is not the most intuitive program,
especially when you don't have the most intuitive person. So
yeah, look at this setup. That's pretty solid. But I think there's a bunch of issues happening right now. So if you're local and you're really concerned about steelhead stuff and you want some stuff that's immediate, there's a proposal to put a dam on the Chehalis River, and that's a movie that Shane just made. There's a movie that he just put out, and it still might be available on YouTube. It's called Chehalis: A Watershed Moment. It's a fantastic film. You know, Shane's done a bunch of other films, you know, Wild Reverence, about what, like, it's an overview. I mean, you can access all that stuff, but as it relates to the Chehalis Dam, the comment period just ended, but you can still make your voice heard about, there's a plan to put a large-scale retention structure. They don't call it a dam. They have it, you know, some politically correct speak for it, on some of the best salmon and steelhead spawning habitat in the state on the Chehalis River.
Right. Which is a river that is currently not dammed at all. Like, this isn't like, you know, I grew up in Sacramento, and, you know, I mean, I was trying to count at one time, like, how many dams there were on just on the American River system that goes up to Tahoe. You know, I lost track at like 13 or something like that. And steelhead used to swim way up there. So you got a dam to that.
Those cotton fields and all that agriculture out there, salmon used to swim out there in those lakes that used to form back in the day.
So we're talking about an entirely free-flowing river with all of its tributaries.
Well, and there's a whole basin-wide restoration plan kind of as part of all this thing. And it would be the biggest basin-wide restoration plan, I think, in American history. About $750 million. So that's one thing. That's a big one as it relates to steelhead. I think the second one right now, is the proposal from Cook Aquaculture to convert their Atlantic salmon net pens in Puget Sound to steelhead production. And that one's just a fool's errand. And Cook's got a really bad record. I mean, they had a salmon net pen up up in the northern part of the Sound that failed, and so there's a lot of information about that, and all the groups here. I mean, I would say, you know, the Wild Fish Conservancy, Wild Steelhead Coalition, Native Fish Society, CCA. I mean, all of the groups they're all going to have some type of action alert around those two particular issues, which are the most immediate. You know, I think there's two things. One is like, we fight a lot of battles, right? But we're losing the war. I mean, this is one of the things that I say. I mean, like I said earlier, I've only been fishing since 2000, and like I moved here in 2002, and by every single metric, as somebody that turned their attention to steelhead after being a trout guy early on, by every metric, as conservation groups, we're failing because it's just continues to get worse and worse. Now, there are some great success stories. The Elwha Dam. Shane made that great movie with the guys from TU, John McMillan.
That was killer.
Like the restoration of a summer run steelhead run on the Elwha River. That's just miraculous.
Yeah.
And that's the good news. I mean, the good news is like if you leave it alone, it'll be okay.
Right.
So yeah, why are you thinking about putting a dam on a completely pristine river? So there's lots you can do, and then I think also you can kind of lend your voice. When you go into that voting booth in the fall, you vote the environment. All things being equal, like there's some decisions made that if the shovel goes in the ground on the Pebble Mine, it's never going to get unwound ever.
Right.
And so if you care about those kind of issues and you can, maybe you have a difference of opinion around some other issues, but all things being equal, that's another way you can do it.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really, I think, valued point given in the day and age that we live in right now.
Yeah. No, that's a good word.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so
I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, and with that,
let's talk fishing.
No, we're done. We're done.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're gonna pull the plug on it. But this is so great. Is that what we're gonna do? Is that we're gonna fire back up in a minute and for a part 2. And so hey, if you're listening, make sure you subscribe so you get the get notified when you get the next one launches next Monday. Man, it's great having Brian on the podcast. And
super fun.
Yeah, we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk fishing, more fishing. We got some funny fishing stories, and so we're trying not to just make it all about fishing stories. But I'm glad we got into some.
Yeah, we got into that. We got to lighten it up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we're gonna lighten it up. So thanks for joining us for this episode of the Gig Harbor Flycast, and we'll see you back next week.